part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hey, this is Chase Smith, founder and CEO of Press Play Podcast. You may have heard me on the Oranges Oranger Cleveland Browns podcast with Jeremy Powell, now wonderfully hosted by Holly Wetzel, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast with Sam Amico, or my own podcast, the Chase Smith Podcast. I wanted to take a few moments to talk to you about a brand new subscription-based podcast we're offering this football season, the Press Play Sports Podcast. This premium podcast feed will send all of the sports podcasts offered on the Press Play Podcast Network to one central feed. Yes, you can still follow and subscribe to all of our individual shows for free on every podcast platform. But if you wanted to consolidate your podcast feed and listen to them all in one location, the Press Play Sports Podcast is for you. I'm talking the Oranges and Oranger Browns podcast with Holly Wetzel and Jeremy Powell, Red Guy and Rhoda, Sabol Brothers on the Baseline, Cavs on the Break, the Dennis Maniloff Show, the Ball Card Show, the Premium Fantasy Podcast, a Swing in a Tribe MLB podcast, and the Tim and Shipe Show, a college football podcast, all in one feed. All 9 of our sports shows curated into one single podcast feed. Out the door, you're looking at $5.36 a month after tax. That's $5.36, just about the cost of a drink at Starbucks. And this is only offered on Apple Podcasts. You can't get this anywhere else. It's an Apple Podcast exclusive. Just go to the search bar and search Press Play Sports. It'll come up and you can subscribe from there. We're excited to offer this consolidated, curated sports feed for you to enjoy. And as always, thank you so much for listening and your support.
Welcome back inside Sabol Brothers on the Baseline, right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us, everyone. I'm John Sabol.
And I'm Scott Sabol. So we have a special guest today. Well, all of our guests are special, but this gentleman is well, I worked with him, let's put it that way, back when I was in college at a batting cage facility. And it sounds like, wait a minute, what are you talking about here? Your college job? Well, he was a former major league player and he played for the Cleveland Indians, and his name is Ron Pruitt. And if you do a search back at the Indians back in the late 70s, early 80s, you'll definitely remember. And if you remember those teams, you'll remember Ron Pruitt. He played for quite a long time, bounced around a little bit. I had a chance to work with him and kind of lost touch. And here we are almost 30 years later. I know it's almost 30 years. And we have an opportunity to talk with him about baseball, about his career, and a whole bunch of other stuff.
And I got to meet him when I was in elementary and middle school back in those days, which was a treat for me, seeing a former Major League Baseball player, Scott, which I got to think that's probably the first former professional athlete that I got to meet at such a young age, which was then Ron Pruitt. We'll have our interview with him and some interesting notes about his playing days and something he found out about Cleveland Municipal Stadium that he didn't know existed at the ballpark until year 3 with the Tribe. Oh man, it was funny. We have that and more coming up right after this. Mm-hmm.
Hey, it's Tito, host of the Premier Fantasy Podcast. Get all the news and analysis you need to dominate your fantasy league. I've been doing this as long as anybody in the business. I can help give you the edge in your leagues. It's the Premier Fantasy Podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
The R&R Podcast going to be rocking and rolling with you because football season is underway. College, Ohio State, the Power Fives, the MAC, the Browns. Michael Regai, are you ready to rock and roll with some football?
Kenny, I've been ready. This is our time of year. This is what R&R is all about. We're going to be with you every week. Kenny just said it. Browns, NFL, Ohio State centric. So you got to stay with us all fall and winter long here on R&R.
That's right. The Regai and Rhoda podcast coming to you here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Subscribe now and don't miss a show.
Hi, this is Maria Gincola with Mindful MMJ Ohio. Did you know that medical marijuana has been legal in Ohio since 2016? If you have one of 25 qualifying medical conditions, you can obtain your medical marijuana card today. The most common conditions are chronic pain, including migraines and back or joint pain, PTSD, fibromyalgia, spinal cord disease or injury, and cancer. If you or someone you know is interested in learning more or to find out if you qualify, visit mindfulmmjohio.com and fill out the short pre-qualification form. The process of finding a physician, filling out paperwork, obtaining medical records, and scheduling an appointment seems like it would be a daunting process for most. But, lucky for you, Mindful MMJ Ohio will help you every step of the way to make the process quick and easy. In most cases, we can approve a qualified patient within 24 hours. And the visit is virtual, so you don't even have to leave home. So what are you waiting for? Visit mindfulmmjohio.com today. That's mindfulmmjohio.com. Let us help you be more mindful of your health and find a natural way to find relief from your symptoms.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. I'm Scott Sabol.
And I'm John Sabol.
And we have a special guest today. He is a 9-year Major League Baseball veteran and former catcher and outfielder for the Cleveland Indians from 1976 to 1980. Our guest today is Ron Pruitt. Ron, it's a pleasure having you on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Scott. Nice to see you. I know we're neighbors. I don't know if people know that or not.
Well, that's funny because I was just going to say that because full disclosure, Ron lives right down the street from me. And it's funny because I didn't know this until I moved back to Northeastern Ohio almost 20 years ago. And I saw him walking down the street. I'm like, wait, Mr. Pruitt, is that you? And he's like, Scott, what are you doing here?
Yeah. Welcome to the.
Yeah, exactly. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? And for those that don't know, how did you make it to the Tribe back in 1976?
Well, I grew up in a place called Flint, Michigan. Went to college at Michigan State. Got drafted by the Rangers in 72 and got traded over to the Indians in 75, winter 75. That's how I got here. Stan Thomas. Me and Stan Thomas for, gosh, I can't remember now what I got traded for. Wasn't that important, I guess. It wasn't that popular.
Now, before you were traded to Cleveland, Ron, you were in the same draft class as current Indians broadcaster Rick Manning, and then later you were teammates with Manning once you did get traded over here. Since you guys have now been in Northeastern Ohio for the last 2 decades, do you still keep in contact with Arch?
I just saw him 2 days ago at the Indians golf outing with Barker. In fact, I'm going down to Columbus with Lenny and Joe Charbonneau, and we're doing a fantasy camp down in Columbus this weekend. So yeah, I still see him, not as much as I used to. Arch is doing the broadcast. He lives out in Phoenix now. I do see Ron Hassey. Occasionally I go out there. He lives in Tucson, and I see every once in a while I'll see Dan Spillner. He'll pop up, and Hargrove lives out there where Hassey is. So I do keep in touch with those guys.
Hargrove lives out there in Phoenix, Arizona too?
Tucson.
Okay, very cool.
So, Ron, how close do you still follow the Indians or Major League Baseball in general, especially since you retired?
Well, I'm going to follow them a little closer this year because you know that when Bally Sports took over, our Dish TV does not carry the Indians now. So I had to get in fact, I'm going to give them a plug. I hope they stay in business. Uzu. You ever hear of Uzu?
No.
It's it's a sports network. They do have some like Fox News and CNN and some Turner broadcast stuff like USA Today. They have about 10 or 15, but most of the stations are regional sports stations. So you can get Boston's game, you can get hockey games, you can get basketball games. Where before I couldn't get anything because you had to go through Bally Sports. And so for right now I'm doing this Uzu, which is very inexpensive, and it's all streaming. So it seems pretty good so far. No, now I can watch them. When all last year you couldn't watch them, and I'm not sure when Bally took over. I guess it was last year. But you have to pay extra, and Dish doesn't even accept it.
So now that you can watch the Tribe, what are your thoughts on the current state of the Cleveland Indians and soon-to-be Guardians?
Well, I think it's a great opportunity for everybody in their organization to play because they definitely sure are having, tryouts right now, basically, it looks like. But I thought at the start of the year they had a very good team, and if you don't have pitching, I mean, that was the whole key right there. All their pitchers went down at one time, and it's just such a fine line. I think they had their best chance. They kind of missed, and you don't know when it's ever going to come back around. You got to have a combination of guys that everything clicks. And I just think of some of the years where they had great players and teams, or great players and fantastic pitchers, and they didn't win anything. So it's just such a hard. To me, it's such a hard sport to get all the way. I was playing with, remember Albie Lopez?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
I was playing with him Monday in the group with him, and we were talking. And he's about 20 years younger than me, I figure. And he played on 2 of the World Series teams, and he won a World Series with Arizona. And there's like only 5% of the players that ever played ever make it to the World Series for one time, let alone he made it 3 times. Mm-hmm. And it's just so hard, and it's just really hard to get there.
So this could be a very complicated question, or maybe with a long answer. What's your thoughts on the current brand of baseball? The trend over the last 5, 6, 7 years, slowly each year, it's the 3 outcome. It's strikeouts, walks, home runs, not many balls put in play like it was 10, 15 or more years ago. You have a lot of shifting going on. What are your thoughts on how baseball has evolved over the last 5 to 10 years?
Well, it's probably after, they went through the steroids and everybody was capable of hitting home runs. I think the owners probably saw that, hey, that's going to draw people into the stands, seeing fireworks go off and stuff like that. It's more of an entertainment than it used to be. I remember, I don't know if you remember the entertainment down at Cleveland Stadium was that organ going.
Right. Yeah, right.
That was the entertainment. And now they play a different song for everybody coming up. And, they don't, I don't know. Yeah, you're right. They don't move the ball around. It's just, I just wonder if somebody pushes trying to get a team together of guys that can spray the ball around, and but will that really matter? Because they'll just play them the way they used to, and 250 hitters, a 250 hitter.
Right.
Right. Once they figure you out, they're not going to, if all the players come up there hitting behind the shift or whatever, sooner or later, they're all going to just start playing you straight up, and you just become a, 230 hitter or whatever the heck they are in normal life,
Mm-hmm.
But no, it's they go a lot more for home runs. And the one thing they don't, I saw a stat where they said Babe Ruth struck out 1 every 8 times. Mm-hmm. And there's guys in the big leagues that strike out right now 1 out of every 4 times, 1 out of every 5 times.
Right,
and
right.
There was times when you struck out, you were in the minor leagues and you struck out 100 times, they just wrote you off. You were just a good minor league player. He'll never hit the big leagues. And I guess that's really not true. But if you're looking for an average, or I guess, like I said, it's home runs or average, and they're looking for, if somebody can have both, that's great. But I think they'd rather go for the home run every 5th time up and than the 310 hitter that knocks in 75 runs, or they got to get the home run that can win the game every, possibility of winning the game every night, somebody hitting the home run. So I don't know. It's just changed. It'll probably change back. These things probably go in cycles. They copy what's going on, what's popular, and everybody's swinging for the fences. That's popular. And you're not going to have any players if you try to change it, I guess, because nobody can bunt or anything like that anymore. So
right.
It's kind of just, but sooner or later, it'll probably change back.
Yeah, it's interesting. You just go back to the 90s with those Indians teams and you look at a box score. It was very rare that you'd see a baseball player that struck out 3 or 4 times in a game. Now you see it quite a bit, and you see the strikeout rates increase and the home run rates increase as well. And so many people think, is it good for the game, bad for the game? And this is a good segue to my next question for you, Ron. The biggest issue people have with baseball now, there's a lot of them, but I think the biggest one that they're trying to tackle is the whole pace of play. that there's too much lull, that pitchers are taking too long, guys are stepping out of the box. They're trying to speed up the game a little bit. Rob Manfred took away the intentional walk of throwing the 4 pitches automatic first base a couple years ago. They're trying to advance the extra inning rule, putting a guy on second base. They did that last year in the COVID shortened season. They're doing it this year. Doesn't look like it's going to happen next year, but pace of play is the big question and the big problem a lot of people have with the game. Do you agree with that? And if so, how would you change that?
Well, I mean, short of turning it into 3 balls and 2 strikes or something like that, I don't know how you're going to do it. I mean, I just look at golf and there's no mention at all of changing golf from, I mean, they have a time limit, I guess they put them on the clock or whatever, but I've never seen anybody punished. They don't make you hurry up and putt if you're taking your time. And it's like, people don't seem to mind that. And they're all, people go to golf tournaments and stuff. So, I mean, it's kind of hard. I don't know how you can do it. I just think, I don't know how you can speed it up, because especially you could speed it up by not having sponsors between innings.
Right. Right.
Then they're not going to do that. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if giving the pitcher 6 pitches instead of 8 it would speed it up at all, or, most pitchers don't take 8 pitches anyways between innings. So I don't know. I mean, it's just something that the game evolves, and that's just the way it is. And I don't know. Maybe it's a part of the society's too impatient now. I mean, maybe that's, I know we used to play faster games, but it could be because we didn't strike out as much. Maybe we put the ball in play. I mean, these guys now, they're gonna at least see 4 or 5 pitches before they strike out. And back when maybe we played, second or third pitch, we were either getting thrown out at first or getting a base hit or whatever. Maybe it's just something as simple as that. They just swing more times and it takes longer when you do that.
There was a complete game Greg Maddux threw back in the late 90s. It was a 76 pitch complete game shutout. You would never see that now. Guys are putting the ball in play. I mean, he never had a 3-0 count.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. It takes longer to strike out.
I'm a big proponent, and I don't know how you would enforce this, but I'm a big proponent. If you somehow made the pitcher stand the rubber, batter in the box, not stepping out, adjusting the batting gloves, adjusting the arm or elbow padding and whatever, the game I think would flow a lot better. Again, I don't know how you'd enforce that, but I think that's a big part of guys is taking their good old time.
I don't think they're taking they just have a routine, and pitchers have a routine, and you like to feel comfortable, and you try to do. I know guys, they try to do the same thing every time, every pitch or every at bat. Every pitch at an at bat, you try to get in the batter's box the same way. And, all this is, you're trying to calm yourself down. You don't want to speed up too much. And if they start trying to speed you up, it's like, it kind of messes with the whole beauty of the game, I guess.
So how would you compare past players, players you played with like you, Rick Manning, back in the 70s and 80s, even into the early 90s, to the current players? How would you compare and contrast the players from the different eras?
Oh, we were much better looking.
Especially those mustaches and the hair. Oh, yeah.
Well, I just think that it's kind of hard to compare from generation to generation, because you don't have the same workout facilities, innovations in training. When we were kind of growing up and learning, we didn't have baseball camps or baseball lessons or baseball schools or anything like that. In fact, when I was in Little League, we coached ourselves.
Right.
We signed up at the recreation center, and we coached our own teams. The parents didn't help out. Heck, the dads were too busy working, and when they got home, they were tired. They barely made it to the games.
Right.
And I just think that nutrition. There's ways that you can, training especially, I think, is a big thing. And we weren't really out of shape. I don't remember ever being out of shape. I used to lift and everything. I thought most guys kept themselves in pretty good shape. I remember Lenny Barker, they were going to fine him. I don't know what he weighs now, but I wouldn't want to guess, but I mean, he's a little heavier than we were all a little heavier than we were, and but they wanted him to come in at 220. I mean, the guy's 6'6", 6'5" back then.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, he hadn't weighed 220 since fifth grade, probably.
Right.
And they kept 220. Now they let a guy. I mean, there's pitchers 300 pounds, aren't there in the big league? Somebody's like, look at Bartolo Colon. Is he still pitching, by the way?
He's pitching somewhere like in Mexico or something.
I mean, they never, they never worry about that now.
Right.
They call it muscle, but just the training is better now. I don't think. I think back when we were playing when we were younger, I think the better athletes all played baseball because basketball wasn't such a big thing. Football was just kind of coming to hockey. Nobody played hockey. We did up in Michigan, but volleyball, lacrosse, soccer. Nobody played soccer, and swimming or anything like that. I just think the better athletes played baseball, and then they played the other sports too. I mean, your teams were all 5 baseball players were on every basketball team or football team or baseball. I mean, they were everywhere. Where the other sports, the guys in football now, they didn't necessarily play basketball or baseball or anything like that. And I just think the good athletes were concentrated in baseball, where now there's you got an international community to choose from. And plus there's twice as many people on earth than there was 50 years ago. And I just think there's just more people to draw from now. So there's going to be better players. But overall, I think the better players back then would always be better players, even not playing now. I mean, there would always be a place for the better players.
Back in your era, the power numbers were relatively low compared to the last 20, 25 years, even post now steroid era. But guys who led the league in home runs in your era, Ron, top in the high 30s, low 40 home runs per season. Now, the art of hitting the ball has really changed in the last 5 or 10 years. We kind of alluded to it a little bit ago, the whole launch angle, exit velocity. Are you a fan of this, quote, new form of analytics that had actually been around a little while? Or do you think it helps or hurts the game for, casual baseball fans?
I just think it's something to occupy you and give you something to try to analyze. I mean, that's what it's there for. I think everybody that's played baseball kind of knows what a launch angle is without ever saying it. And coaches, I remember they could stand next to a guy throwing, warming up or something. They could tell you whether he had it or whether he was throwing hard or not. You didn't need a radar gun. You could tell by how guys were swinging at the pitches. If they weren't catching up to him, he was throwing hard. I mean, if 9 guys can't figure out how to, get around now, then the guy was unhittable that day. But I don't know. They give everybody a lot of chances to do good with different stats. I like the one where you hit the ball hard for an out.
Oh yeah, the contact. Yeah,
the good contacts. I'd like to see somebody like going in the Gabe Paul or Phil Sagi back then and say, hey, I only hit 220, but man, I led the team in hard hit ground balls.
That's something to brag about.
I like to see their face when they're
right.
Oh my goodness, get this guy out of here.
Yeah, right.
No, they do have some strange analytics, and I'm sure they help somehow. I mean, if you can swing up a little bit more, you'll hit more home runs. You'll do it. I mean, that's what they want you to do.
So speaking of analytics, Ron, I was looking up your numbers here. Did you know that you have a lifetime batting average of 304 with runners in scoring position?
Yeah, really?
Yeah. I looked it up. I'm like, wow, you did. Yeah, I'm like, wow,
that's not count walks either.
That's pretty impressive. Well, maybe there was walks there too. I don't know.
No, I mean that can't be counting. I don't think they even.
Oh, that's right, because it wouldn't be average. Yeah. So yeah, I was pretty impressed by that.
Well, wrong time, I guess, huh?
Yeah, right. I don't know. I just stood out when I saw it.
Would have been a good candidate for that Billy Ball in Oakland when they had that about 20 years ago when they got a bunch of guys that were average players, but they never really played a lot, so you really didn't know what they could do, and they got them all together, and they just 270 to 290 batting averages, and you know what I mean, limited power, and they had some pretty good teams, but then again, they never won anything. So.
Right. They got on base.
You're talking about Moneyball. Mm-hmm.
Moneyball, that's right.
Yeah.
Moneyball. Billy Ball. I was thinking of Billy Martin.
Well, Billy Beane was the guy in charge of that. He was the GM at the time out in Oakland.
Yeah.
Your final year in the big leagues, 1983. We kind of talked about the steroid era. You missed it by a few years, give or take. But during your later playing years in the early 80s, without naming any names, did you know about PEDs or know any guys that were, quote, taking something like that in that era?
I knew there's a weightlifter at Michigan State. I knew that did. He was a power lifter, you know, a bodybuilder. And I knew what was Alzado and who was the giant guy that played for the Oakland Raiders. I remember we used to stay in a hotel where we stayed at in Oakland when we go out there. And he died. And you could tell, I mean, he was like 6'8", crazy strong. But no, not really. I was never offered it. I never saw anybody do it or anything like that. But, you hear rumors of not in believe it or not, it wasn't in baseball because I don't think they figured it would help you, increase your reflexes anyways. But I guess it does. But no, I never saw anybody or got offered it or anything like that.
So do you have any good Cleveland Stadium stories? We hear about the locker rooms down there being really small and cramped and dungeony in spots. Any good stories about the park itself, whether playing or coming back to visit the old place?
Well, I didn't know. I took about 3 years before I knew there was a batting cage.
Really?
Really? No one ever. I'd never had any idea. I'd see guys walking out. They'd be going like down towards right field. Our locker room was on first base side, and they'd be walking down there, and I was wondering where the heck they going. And it took about 3 years to figure out they had a batting cage down there, but they shared it. It was a storage room they shared with the Browns, so you had to move stuff out of the way and stuff. It was just real small. It wasn't really a full batting cage, but we could go down there and take some swings if it was raining or something like that. But no, just Cy Bynack and his hockey puck hamburgers and dried up burnt hot dogs and soup, and I mean that's all we had. That was the after the game meal, and
right
now I guess I got gourmet chefs that cook dinners for them, and it's crazy now, but no, just I don't know, just. It was just fun. It was a cool place, and you never knew what was going to happen. Nothing strange really happened. We used to have fun when they used to bring all the circus people in. Remember when they used to have the flying Walendas or that, and they'd walk across from foul pole to foul pole and things like that. But I like the behind the fence parties. We used to go back there after batting practice, and it was just a good time. We enjoyed it.
When you were here, when they tore down the stadium back in the mid-90s, did you happen to take anything before that happened? Or maybe after your playing career was over, did you take anything? Or did you, after you left, the Indians went on to your next team? Was there something, a memento you took from the old Municipal?
No, I don't think so. I probably didn't even know they were tearing it down. I might have been out of town or something like that. No, I didn't. I didn't get anything like a chair or something like that. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, we talked to Eric. We talked to Eric Metcalf a few weeks ago on the podcast here, and he said he really wanted an old Cleveland Municipal Stadium seat, and he still wants one. He's trying to find one, but every time he tries to inquire about it to someone online, they try to,
jack up the price.
Exactly, because they know who he is, Eric Metcalf.
Yeah.
And Scott and I told him he got a little jealous at us that we told him that we have a pair each, and he was a little.
How did you guys get it? I mean, you must have known when to go down there or something.
Well, I'll let Scott explain this part of the story.
I knew a guy who was working security at construction at the D. Well, when they were tearing it down, he goes, "I can get you a couple of seats." I go, "Okay." So he said, "Well, I'll meet you in the parking lot. I'll give them to you." So that's how I got the 2 seats back in whatever year that was.
No. I must not have as much pull as you, Scott.
Yeah.
Ron, real quick here, before we're going to go in this next segment, we're going to do some rapid fire questions. But before Scott introduces that, I wanted to actually ask you this question real quick to you about double play. For those who are listening, may not know what double play was in the Akron area. And it was very important for Scott and for myself, especially in the 90s growing up. It was a batting cage that you opened up in Hudson. Didn't you have a second one somewhere else?
Eventually, he bought the one in Cuyahoga Falls.
Okay.
That used to be on, what the heck was the name of that? The name of that road was, anyway, there used to be a batting cage in Cuyahoga Falls. And he bought that one too. But that's when I left there. About the time he bought that, I left there. But no, that was the main one was the double play. Yeah. And then we fixed it up with fields. We put a couple baseball fields back there, and I like to think we were the ones that started fall baseball in the area, because no one had ever heard of it. They thought we were nuts. They said, "Oh, the people play football." I said, "I don't know. I think the weather's pretty nice in the fall. Let's give it a try." And we had like 30 teams, boom, just like that. That wanted different age groups and stuff, and we played over there at the Stowe Fields. And then Ed Koya, you remember him, Scott. Him and Marty Erball were the owners, and they bought the land behind double play, and they made some fields, and we brought it over there and played fall ball. And I'm not even sure what they do. Is that still there? I haven't been over there in so long.
They tore it down. Double play is no longer there. Yeah, it's just basically at the intersection there. There's just some grass field. I think the fields might still be.
The fields are still there. When I came into town last summer, my dad and I drove back there, and the fields are still there. I played so many like middle school all-star baseball games on that far right field, Ron.
Yeah.
My dad, every time, even when we drove in over there to look at it, he's like, "Hey, remember that one time when you were pitching in that 7th grade all-star game and you gave up like a grand slam?" And I'm like, "Yeah, thanks, Dad." But those fields are still there. Are they still in use? Good. I'm not really sure. But it was one of our, growing up in elementary school and in junior high, was one of our favorite fields we played at. But also the double play as a whole in the batting cage was a great spot. You had putt there and everything too. I would go there with Scott all the time, and he would come home from college, and we had a lot of great memories there. So.
Oh yeah, use the batting cages all the time, and a lot of good memories back then.
Yep, sure was, and those were probably the best fields around too.
Oh, no question.
Because those guys knew how to take care of grass. I know that.
Yep. So, Ron, we're going to end our interview with some rapid fire questions, just basic questions. And the first question is your all-time favorite baseball movie.
All-time favorite. 8 Men Out.
Ooh, good choice.
Was not expecting you to say that. So I assume you've seen Field of Dreams, right, Ron?
Yeah.
So in the movie Field of Dreams, and this topic came up recently when Major League Baseball did the Field of Dreams game with the White Sox and Yankees a few weeks back, there was a debate. Is it let's play catch or have a catch? In the movie, they say have a catch. I always say, and Scott always says, play catch. What is it? Play catch or have a catch?
It's kind of like soda and pop, I guess.
Right.
Depends on where you grew up, Like I know I grew up in Michigan, they call it pop.
Yeah,
we're about soda.
Yeah, we're pop guys. But do you think it's play catch or have catch?
I think it's play catch.
Yeah, I agree.
Have a catch sounds too proper.
Right.
It's like English or something.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could change one thing about baseball, what would it be? We kind of touched on this a little bit earlier.
Move the pitcher's mound back.
Ooh.
How far?
Okay.
Well, I don't care. So they can't throw a catch yet. Give you more of a chance. I mean, when you only succeed 1 out of 3 times and you're great, you would be great 1 out of 3 times. It's time to equal those odds out, maybe.
Nice.
See how they like it.
All right, now to a random non-baseball question. What TV show are you watching right now? And if you're not watching a TV show, for fans out there, what's your all-time favorite TV show?
Well, right now I'm watching. We're watching a show called Doc Martin series. It's a goofy English. I like these English these shows, like the Hallmark Channel. And but all-time show, Justified.
Okay.
What's your favorite or proudest moment as a member of the Indians?
Well, as a member of the Indians, it's probably hitting when I think me and Paul Dade, opening day, hit back-to-back home runs or something like that.
Mhm.
That was probably the coolest moment for me. You know, I wasn't with the team very long, and that's the one I kind of remember the most.
How many game-worn Indians jerseys from your playing days do you currently own in your closet or in a box in the basement or the attic?
I have no idea. My daughters cleaned me out, I think.
Oh, so they took them all?
I had four daughter, yeah. And I was asking them a couple of years ago. I go, you guys got, you know, and they wouldn't own up to it, but I know they got a few of them. But I don't know how many I got. I probably got 2 or 3 left. But,
Okay. Hats too?
you know, they just didn't get it. Was strange. I mean, you just didn't think of, you know, I didn't think of the last day of the year taking my uniform.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now they probably just give them to guys when they're leaving for the year. But back then, I mean, they made sure they got every bit of equipment back.
Oh, I believe it.
They were going to use those uniforms somewhere. I mean, they were going to send them down to AA or A ball or somewhere, take the numbers off them and names off them and stuff and send them down. And so I don't remember them letting you have one. I mean, the guy in Texas let me have one, but I don't know what happened to that. I think one of my girls had it. I got 4 girls. One of them's got it. I'm sure.
Hat? They have the hats too, or did you have the hats?
Oh yeah, they got those too.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah, but
yeah.
I still got a bunch of bats left and gloves and stuff like that. I'm hanging on to, but yeah, we're doing this fantasy camp. I got one uniform, and I told the guy, I'm not getting in this uniform, so you better have something down there to wear. Oh, he said, well, we got some. Don't worry. We got some.
That's funny.
Oh,
What's your favorite restaurant in the area?
well, probably Sully's downtown there in Medina.
Mm-hmm.
But we found a new one just recently. I kind of like. I think it might turn into someplace we might hang out. Remember the old tavern in Richfield?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Richfield, yeah. There's a Ukrainian restaurant up there now,
In the same building?
and
In the same
yes,
building?
yeah. They remodeled. It's been there. I guess it's been there a year or two, but with COVID, you know, they probably didn't have such a good year. And Trevisano's, we go to Trevisano's up there in Strongsville.
We'll have to let Mark Price know that, because when we had him on the podcast, he told us when he was a member of the Cavs and lived in Hudson that his favorite restaurant he would always go to was the Tavern of Richfield, and he was bummed to know that it's not around anymore. Obviously, it closed years ago, but
Yeah, we used to hang out there. I remember. I don't remember hanging out there when Price was there, but I know Lambeer and maybe that was back when Price was there. But you know, Campy and those guys, we used to always go out there. Austin Carr.
yeah.
And, you know, when Rich Rollins was working for the Cavaliers, and Stepien was the owner.
Mm-hmm.
Ted Stepien was the owner. We used to go out there a lot. And Mel Rose, I was good friends with Mel Rose, and he died really young. I remember that. And I don't know, just raising kids, you just don't eat out as much, I guess.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
You probably know that.
Oh yeah.
Ron, who's your favorite teammate when you're a member of the Indians?
Probably Lenny Barker. And you know, there was a few guys. Me and Lenny, and Archie, and Dan Spillner used to hang around a lot. But probably Lenny.
And the final question: what's the toughest pitcher you faced in your career?
The toughest pitcher. I don't know, probably Goose Gossage. Something like that. Yeah, they were all tough. I mean, you know, even the supposedly easy pitchers were tough if they had good stuff that day.
Right.
You know? And they're all capable of getting you out anytime. And but probably Goose Gossage was probably the scariest, and left-handed, I'm guessing Ron Guidry, even though I did take him deep one game, but he was still pretty tough. I mean, you know, but I always played against him all these left-handers, and I don't. Back then, the majority of left-handers were good pitchers back then. I mean, they were some of the best pitchers in the league, and I always got a chance to play against them, unfortunately. Yeah, probably Goose Gossage and Guidry.
Yeah, facing Gossage would be pretty intimidating with that nice mustache.
Yeah, it would, especially like I said, when you don't usually face. I had to be somebody didn't want to bat, or somebody doesn't want to bat, and they send me up there. That's what it usually was. About the 8th, 9th inning, someone to get a sore arm or hurt their finger or something, and 6-3 game, and Gossage has already struck out 2 guys, and here I come.
Throwing you to the
my
wolves.
little pop-up somewhere,
Right.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, that's too funny. Well, Ron, we want to thank you very much for joining us. We always like to do, talk about the old days, with the Indians and just Cleveland history, and your perspective on that is something that we really wanted to get. So thank you very much for joining us here this evening. Stay healthy. I'll probably see you around the neighborhood. I mean, you're right around the corner.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it, guys. And it was just, I'd stayed here in Cleveland. I really like the area. And I got to do a shout out to my girls, Veronica and Stephanie and Natalie and Ayla, and my little granddaughter, Aria, and my wife, Lorraine.
Very cool. Ron, thank you so much for hanging out this evening and talking to us. We appreciate it. And always love talking old school stuff, especially Indians, with a former player like yourself.
Anytime. All right.
You got it, Ron.
Hey, thanks.
All right. Take care.
All right.
I can't believe that they didn't know that Cleveland Stadium didn't have a batting cage for 3 years.
I mean,
nothing against them. There was just no batting cage.
Did he not get the memo? I mean, how does Ron, or how did some of those players not know that existed? That's so funny.
That is classic. He said they had to move all the brown stuff out of that warehouse, out of that room, so they could put a batting cage. It reminds you of Major League. It reminds you kind of like Major, doesn't it? But that's how it was back in the day.
And that's how it was. We interview these players, Scott, and we read books about the old stadium and things like that. And we always hear funny stories like, okay, the locker room was disgusting. It was small. There was rarely any, hot water, kind of like the movie Major League. It was damp. It was cold. It was windy. Oh, by the way, we have a batting cage here. And it took Ron Pruitt 3 years to know. And by all means, we're not making fun of him. It's just funny that it took him that long that the Indians organization didn't communicate that or somehow did not get to him.
Right. Exactly. And they just ate hot dogs and hamburgers in their post-game meal. And they went on, with their evening. So it's cool too, that he still keeps in contact with Len Barker and Dan Spillner and all those guys from back in the day, doing, various golf outings and fundraisers for the Indians in the community. That's always good to see.
Yeah. And especially Rick Manning, who was actually drafted in the first round, a round before him, which was cool to know. And then a couple years later, after he went through minor leagues, he got traded to the Indians, and he and Manning were teammates.
Right. Exactly.
Very cool. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. We once again want to thank you, the listeners, for listening and subscribing on our podcast channels on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. And of course, another thank you to Ron Pruitt. That'll wrap it up on this edition of Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast, all part of the Press Play Podcast Network. We'll see you next time.